Aliya stood in the center of the sprawling, sunlit living room of her marital estate, the silence pressing against her ears. 5 years ago, she and Jordan had been the epitome of black excellence and young love. Jordan, a brilliant and impossibly wealthy real estate mogul, had swept her off her feet. Aliya, with her gentle spirit and innocent heart, had believed their love was an unshakable fortress. But over the past year, the warmth had bled out of their home, replaced by late nights, vague excuses, and an emotional chasm she didn't know how to cross. She thought it was just a phase, a side effect of Jordan's demanding empire. That was until she opened his iPad to check a shared calendar, and a message notification dropped down like a guillotine. Paris was everything I ever wanted, baby. Thank you for giving me the luxury I deserve. Can't wait to see you tonight. Kim. Aliya's fingers trembled. A morbid curiosity seized her, forcing her to click the message thread. It was a digital graveyard of her marriage. Hundreds of messages, pictures of Jordan holding a stunning, sophisticated woman in designer clothes, dining at Michelin star restaurants, and lounging on yachts. It was a stark contrast to the distant, exhausted man who barely looked at Aliya across the dinner table anymore. The air vanished from the room. Aliya's chest tightened, a sharp, suffocating pain radiating through her ribs. The iPad slipped from her numb fingers, shattering on the marble floor. Her knees buckled. She collapsed onto the cold stone, curling into a tight ball as the first agonizing sob ripped from her throat. When Jordan returned home that night, he didn't even notice the shattered glass or his wife's bloodshot eyes. He packed a bag, citing an emergency business trip, and left. Aliya said nothing. She simply sat in the dark, bearing the suffocating weight of her sadness, her innocent heart breaking quietly in the shadows. Miles away, in a minimalist, high-tech penthouse overlooking the city, Jae Kyun stared at the private investigator's photographs scattered across his desk. The handsome Korean billionaire ran a hand through his dark hair, his jaw clenched so tight it ached. Jae Kyun had vast wealth, but he despised the frivolous display of it. He believed in hard work, quiet philanthropy, and building a legacy. His wife Kim, however, thrived on opulence. When Jae Kyun had firmly refused to fund her endless demands for daily 5-star dinners and monthly luxury vacations, claiming they were hollow and superficial, a bitter rift had grown between them. Kim had accused him of being inadequate, of failing her expectations. Now, looking at the photos of Kim laughing in the arms of Jordan, a man who willingly threw his wealth at her feet, Jae Kyun felt a toxic mix of betrayal and wounded pride. His dignity as a man had been trampled on. Driven by a blinding, irrational anger, Jae Kyun didn't seek out Kim. Instead, his fury targeted the other side of the equation. He found out where Jordan's wife worked, a quiet community art center, and marched in. Aliya was organizing paintbrushes when a tall, striking man with stormy eyes stormed into her classroom. "Are you Aliya?" Jae Kyun demanded, his voice a low, dangerous rumble. "Yes? Can I help you?" Aliya asked, her voice fragile. She had barely slept in days, her nerves frayed to the breaking point. "I'm Jae Kyun, Kim's husband," he snapped, stepping closer. "Tell me, did you know your husband is funding my wife's delusions? Or are you just too weak to keep your own man at home?" The cruelty of his words, steeped in his own bruised ego and refusal to acknowledge his own marital failings, hit Aliya like a physical blow. The room began to spin. Her breathing grew shallow and erratic, the onset of a severe panic attack. I didn't," Aliya gasped, clutching her chest as tears spilled down her cheeks. She was already so miserable, so hollowed out, that Jae Kyun's vicious confrontation pushed her over the edge. Seeing her crumble, Jae Kyun faltered for a fraction of a second, but his pride demanded he stay angry. He turned on his heel and walked out, leaving Aliya gasping for air on the floor of the art room, entirely consumed by her emotional agony. The confrontation at the art center was only the beginning of the nightmare. By the end of the week, the whispers turned into a deafening reality. Jordan and Kim had officially moved in together. They leased a sprawling, ostentatious mansion in the hills, flaunting their affair without a single ounce of shame. They didn't care about Jae Kyun's shattered dignity. Nor did they give a second thought to Aliya's profound, quiet devastation. Jae Kyun's rage boiled over. He drove to the new mansion, demanding to see Jordan. The confrontation was brief and humiliating. Jordan stood in the doorway, exuding arrogant wealth, with Kim smirking behind him. She wanted a man who treats her like a queen, Jae Kyun, Jordan sneered. Not a glorified accountant. Move on. The door slammed in his face. Jae Kyun stood on the doorstep, shaking with a fury he could no longer contain. His marriage was over, his pride was in tatters, and the blame burned like acid in his veins. In a state of blind frustration, he needed someone to direct his rage toward. He needed to end this drama, to scream at the only other person involved in this messy square. He drove straight to Aliya's estate. He didn't care if she cried this time. He was going to confront her, demand they take legal action, demand she do something to ruin Jordan the way Kim had ruined him. Jae Kyun hammered his fist against the grand double doors of Aliya's home. "Aliya, open the door," he shouted. There was no answer. He pushed the handle, surprised to find the heavy oak door unlatched. It swung open, revealing the silent, cavernous foyer. "Aliya!" Jae Kyun called out, his angry strides echoing on the marble. He marched into the living room, ready to unleash his tirade. The words died in his throat. There, in the center of the room, lay Aliya. She was crumpled on the floor, deathly pale and entirely motionless. A spilled glass of water and a scattered bottle of prescription anxiety medication lay near her outstretched hand. The anger vanished from Jae Kyun's veins, replaced by a sudden icy shock. "Aliya," he whispered, his voice trembling as the reality of what his and Jordan's cruelty had wrought finally crashed down upon him. He dropped to his knees beside her lifeless form, the crushing weight of his own mistakes finally catching up to him. Panic, cold and sharp, finally pierced through Jae Kyun's armor of rage. He scooped Aliya's fragile, unconscious body into his arms, his heart hammering against his ribs. The drive to the private hospital was a blur of blaring horns and reckless speed. He carried her through the emergency doors, barking orders at the medical staff with the commanding authority of a man used to being obeyed. Hours seemed to stretch into eternity as he paced the sterile waiting room. The fire that had consumed him for weeks was entirely extinguished, replaced by a gnawing guilt. He had attacked a woman who was already drowning. Finally, a tired-looking doctor emerged, scanning the room before his eyes landed on Jae Kyun. "Are you the husband?" the doctor asked. Jae Kyun opened his mouth to deny it, to explain the messy, intertwined tragedy of their lives, but the words wouldn't come. He simply gave a curt nod. "Your wife is stable," the doctor sighed, looking at his clipboard. The fainting was caused by extreme emotional stress, severe dehydration and exhaustion. "But you need to be incredibly careful moving forward, sir. The stress is putting an immense strain on her body, and more importantly on the baby." Jae Kyun froze. The world tilted on its axis. "The baby? She's 8 weeks pregnant," the doctor confirmed, his tone turning stern. "You are going to be a father. She needs a calm environment, proper nutrition and absolute peace. Take care of her, and take care of your unborn child." Jae Kyun, a man known in the corporate world for his ferocious temper and ruthless negotiation tactics, felt an unprecedented wave of profound, grounding calm wash over him. A father. The doctor's mistaken assumption echoed in his mind. He looked through the small glass window of the hospital room, watching Aliya sleep, her face pale and streaked with dried tears. For the first time he truly saw her. An incredibly innocent woman, so gentle she didn't even know how to weaponize her pain or confront her cheating husband. She had just absorbed the blow. A deep, unfamiliar empathy took root in his chest. When Aliya was discharged the next morning, Jae Kyun did not take her back to the sprawling, empty estate she shared with Jordan. The thought of leaving her alone with her ghosts made his stomach churn. Instead, his black SUV pulled up to his own residence, the secure, ultramodern penthouse overlooking the city skyline. He guided a weak, bewildered Aliya to the guest wing. "Mrs. Park," Jae Kyun addressed his stern but warm-hearted head housekeeper, his tone leaving no room for argument. "This is Aliya. She is expecting a child and needs complete rest. Prepare nutrient-dense meals, ensure she takes her vitamins, and see to it that she wants for nothing." Mrs. Park bowed deeply, ushering a confused Aliya into a sunlit bedroom outfitted with plush linens and fresh flowers. As the door clicked shut, Jae Kyun walked to his study, pouring himself a single glass of scotch. He stared out at the sprawling metropolis, his mind drifting to the irony of his situation. The truth hidden behind the tabloid gossip was that he had never wanted to marry Kim. Their union had been a cold, calculated arrangement forced upon him by his traditional, domineering parents to merge two corporate empires. He had tried to make it work, tried to find common ground, but Kim's insatiable greed had suffocated him. He realized now that his anger toward Aliya had been entirely misplaced. He had been projecting his own bitterness, his lack of agency in his own marriage, his resentment of his parents' control, onto a woman who was a genuine victim of love. He was determined not to let Jordan and Kim destroy her completely. Aliya woke up surrounded by unfamiliar, luxurious minimalism. The scent of jasmine tea and warm porridge drifted from a tray on the bedside table. Memories of the previous day rushed back in fragments. The crushing despair, the darkness, and the terrifying sight of Jae Kyun standing over her. The bedroom door opened softly, and Jae Kyun stepped in. He wore a simple gray sweater, looking vastly different from the imposing, furious billionaire who had stormed into her art classroom. Aliya shrank back against the headboard, her eyes wide with apprehension. "Why am I here? What do you want from me?" she whispered, her voice trembling. "Please, I can't take any more fighting." Jae Kyun stopped at the foot of the bed, his expression unreadable but his eyes soft. "There will be no more fighting here, Aliya," he said quietly. Aliya was shattered by the sudden, jarring change in him. The menacing presence was gone, replaced by a quiet, protective intensity. "I don't understand. My husband." "Your husband is gone," Jae Kyun interrupted gently, sitting in a chair near the window. "And you cannot go back to that empty house. Not in your condition." Aliya blinked, clutching the duvet. "My condition?" Jae Kyun leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. "The doctors told me at the hospital. They thought I was your husband. Aliya, you are pregnant." The air left Aliya's lungs. Her hands instinctively flew to her flat stomach. A child. Jordan's child. The very thing they had prayed for during their happiest years, arriving now, amidst the ruins of their marriage. Tears welled in her eyes, spilling over as the tragic reality settled over her. She was carrying the baby of a man who was building a life with someone else. "Cry if you need to," Jae Kyun said, his voice a steady anchor in her turbulent storm. "But know this. You are not alone anymore. You stay here. You focus on that child. And I will make sure neither Jordan nor Kim ever hurt you again." In the weeks that followed, the atmosphere within Jae Kyun's sprawling penthouse underwent a quiet, miraculous transformation. For years, the sleek, glass-walled residence had been nothing more than an expensive empty shell, a place where Jae Kyun slept between grueling board meetings, devoid of any real warmth. But now it felt like a home. It was the little things at first. The sterile scent of luxury room sprays was gradually replaced by the soothing, earthy aroma of lavender, Aliya's signature scent. It lingered in the hallways, soft and comforting. Jae Kyun found himself pausing in the foyer just to breathe it in, marveling at how a space so vast could be so profoundly altered by the presence of one gentle soul. Determined to provide Aliya with the stability her own husband had ripped away, Jae Kyun seamlessly stepped into the role of a devoted protector. When she expressed a desire to return to her art classroom, he didn't just allow it, he facilitated it. He altered his demanding schedule to drive her himself. He would carry her supplies, hand her a packed lunch prepared by Mrs. Park, and wrap her scarf tightly around her neck before she stepped out of the car. He did everything a responsible, loving husband would do, acting with a natural tenderness that completely contradicted his ruthless corporate reputation. For the first time in his life, Jae Kyun had someone to truly care for, and the act of giving that care was slowly healing his own fractured heart. At first, Aliya believed Jae Kyun's attentive behavior was born purely out of empathy for a pregnant, abandoned woman. She was deeply grateful, though she often felt she was a burden to a man who had his own betrayal to process. But as the days turned into weeks, her artistic eye began to notice the subtle shadows beneath his actions. She watched him late one evening as he stood by the kitchen island, quietly observing her while she sketched on a notepad. His eyes held a profound, quiet longing, mixed with a vulnerability he carefully hid from the rest of the world. It suddenly clicked for Aliya. He wasn't just being kind. He was experiencing the domestic warmth he had been starved of his entire life. Jae Kyun had been forced into an arranged marriage with a woman who treated their union as a business transaction. He had never known what it was like to come home to a partner who asked about his day, who poured him tea, or who simply wanted to sit in comfortable silence. He had lived in an emotional desert. As Aliya folded her sketchpad, she realized that they were both refugees from broken promises. Her heart ached for the pain he had endured silently, and in that shared understanding, the awkwardness between them dissolved, replaced by a deep, unspoken bond of mutual healing. The crisp evening air felt refreshing as Jae Kyun and Aliya took a leisurely stroll down a vibrant, tree-lined avenue in the city's upscale district. Aliya felt relaxed, dressed comfortably in a fitted white tank top, an olive wraparound skirt, and a cozy black jacket to ward off the chill. She wore absolutely no jewelry. Her dark, wavy hair cascaded freely around her face, framing her natural, innocent beauty. Beside her, Jae Kyun walked close, his hand hovering near the small of her back in a subtle, protective gesture. They radiated the effortless atmosphere of a caring husband and a profoundly loved wife. As they approached the entrance of a high-end, Michelin-starred restaurant, the easy silence was shattered. Stepping out of the valet area were Jordan and Kim. The two couples froze. Kim's eyes swept over Aliya, her lips curling into a condescending smirk. To Kim, a woman who operated like a ruthless corporate machine, value was measured in carat size and designer labels. She didn't feel a flinch of guilt or awkwardness seeing her husband with her lover's wife. She only cared about her physical happiness and elevated status. Aliya's simple clothing was, to Kim, a confirmation of her own superiority. Jordan, however, completely froze. His eyes locked onto Aliya, and a sudden sharp ache pierced his chest. He had convinced himself that Aliya was too soft, a useless woman, who didn't know how to survive the cutthroat high society he was climbing. He had justified his affair by seeing Kim as his ultimate ticket to the corporate elite. Yet, looking at Aliya now, glowing, unbothered, and radiating a pure, natural elegance that no amount of money could buy, his justifications crumbled. He saw the way Jae Kyun looked at her, prioritizing her comfort over everything else. A tidal wave of nostalgia hit Jordan, reminding him of the days when his life was filled with Aliya's pure love and unwavering devotion. Watching another man, especially a billionaire of Jae Kyun's caliber, cherish the wife he had so callously discarded ignited a bitter, burning envy in his gut. He had traded a sanctuary for a stepping stone, and seeing Jae Kyun and Aliya together made him realize exactly what he had lost. The brief encounter outside the restaurant had planted a poisonous seed in Jordan's mind. He returned to the sprawling, opulent mansion he shared with Kim, but the walls suddenly felt cold and lifeless. Kim had immediately launched into a monologue about stock options and a looming corporate merger, entirely unfazed by the run-in with her estranged husband and Aliya. But Jordan couldn't hear a word she was saying. His mind was stuck on the image of Aliya. She had looked ethereal, grounded, and entirely out of his reach. The realization that Jae Kyun, a man of immense power and wealth, was treating her with the quiet reverence Jordan had failed to provide gnawed at his ego. Driven by a toxic mix of wounded pride, jealousy, and possessiveness, Jordan couldn't let it go. He began scouring the internet for any mention of the two, but Jae Kyun kept his private life impeccably guarded. Frustrated, Jordan took a step further into the dark. He hired a high-end private detective. Within days, thick manila envelopes began arriving at Jordan's private office. Inside were photographs of Aliya and Jae Kyun. Pictures of them walking through private gardens, Jae Kyun opening car doors for her, and the two of them sharing quiet, genuine smiles over lunches at secluded cafes. Every image was a dagger to Jordan's chest. He had thought Aliya would crumble without him, but instead, she was blossoming under the care of a man who truly understood her worth. Back at the penthouse, the bond between Aliya and Jae Kyun had deepened into something entirely unexpected.
I can't do this alone.
They were no longer
You are
just
not
two
alone,
broken
Aliya.
people
I am
sharing
right
a
here.
space. They had become each other's sanctuary. One rainy night, the penthouse was cloaked in silence. Aliya, unable to quiet the anxious thoughts swirling in her mind, slipped out of bed. She wore a sleek silk nightdress, her long dark hair falling freely down her spine as she wandered toward the kitchen island for a glass of water. She didn't realize she wasn't alone until a soft pool of lamplight caught her eye in the living area. Jae Kyun was sitting on the deep leather sofa. He was dressed casually in gray sweatpants and was bare-chested, the faint glow of the lamp highlighting the broad, sculpted lines of his shoulders and torso. He wore a pair of wire-rimmed reading glasses, a heavy book resting in his lap. Seeing Aliya searching for a glass, he immediately closed the book, stood up, and crossed the room to help her pour the water. Aliya gasped softly, startled by his sudden, silent movement. "Did I startle you?" Jae Kyun asked, his voice a low, soothing rumble in the quiet night. He looked so different with his glasses on. Less like the intimidating billionaire and more like the gentle, protective man she had come to know. No, absolutely not," Aliya stammered, her cheeks flushing warm. She took the glass from him, her fingers brushing his, and took a sip with sudden shyness and hesitation. Under the dim kitchen lights, she found herself admiring him. Her feelings had grown profoundly toward Jae Kyun, but it wasn't just his striking physical presence that moved her. It was his unwavering kindness, his quiet endurance, and the fiercely caring way he treated her. Everything a true husband should be. She looked down at the marble counter, a wave of vulnerability washing over her. "I can't sleep, Jae Kyun," she confessed, her voice trembling slightly. "I feel that I will not be able to take care of my child alone."
You are not alone,
Jae
Aliya.
Kyun
I
stepped
am right
closer,
here.
his expression softening with infinite patience. "As I told you, you are not alone, Aliya. I will be by your side if you are okay with my presence." He paused, his dark eyes searching hers. "I know circumstances were different. I know you are healing." And, before Jae Kyun could finish his sentence, the distance between them vanished. Aliya stepped into his space, raising her delicate hands to gently cup his face. His skin was warm beneath her palms, and the depth of understanding in his eyes took her breath away. "You are the most romantic and caring person I ever know, Jae Kyun," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. Unable to hold back the weight of her gratitude and growing affection, she stepped fully into his embrace, burying her face against his bare, warm chest. It was a gesture of absolute assurance and deep understanding. She felt his heartbeat, steady, strong, and entirely hers in that moment. Jae Kyun let out a soft exhale, as if a weight he had carried his entire life had finally been lifted. He framed her delicate waist with his large hands, holding her firmly against him. Then, with an effortless grace, he lifted her into his arms. He carried her down the hall, not back to the guest wing, but into his own spacious, dimly lit bedroom. He laid her gently onto the massive plush bed, pulling the thick duvet over them both. There was no rush, no frantic desperation. Only an unhurried adult intimacy rooted in profound comfort and safety. For the first time in months, the shadows of betrayal and the ghosts of their past marriages completely faded away. As they settled into the pillows, the storm outside seemed miles away. Aliya shifted, closing the small gap between them on the mattress. She looked up at him, her eyes heavy with sleep and newfound peace. "Can I hug you, Jae Kyun?" she murmured softly. A gentle smile touched his lips as he opened his arms to her. "Always," he replied softly. She wrapped her arms around his torso, pressing herself against his warmth, and finally fell into a deep, dreamless sleep, free of any nightmares or distress. Jordan's obsession had reached a boiling point. The photographs provided by his private investigator were no longer enough. He needed to assert his presence. He intercepted Aliya one afternoon as she was leaving her art classroom, stepping into her path with a look of desperate entitlement. He expected her to cower, to show the fragility she always had. Instead, Aliya looked at him with a calm, impenetrable detachment. When he demanded they talk about fixing things, she cut him off with a steady voice. "There is nothing to fix, Jordan. I want a divorce," she stated firmly. Jae Kyun has already prepared his divorce papers. Kim signed them yesterday without a second thought. It's over for all of us. Let me go. The mention of Jae Kyun's name struck a nerve. Driven by a blinding envy of the billionaire who had effortlessly claimed the woman he had discarded, Jordan refused to accept defeat. If he couldn't intimidate Aliya, he would go straight to the source. That evening, Jordan bypassed security and stormed into the lobby of Jae Kyun's corporate headquarters, demanding a meeting. Jae Kyun, sitting behind his massive oak desk, allowed him in. The roles were entirely reversed from their first encounter. Jordan paced the floor, shouting accusations, threatening legal ruin, and boasting about his own wealth and status. Jae Kyun did not raise his voice. He sat completely still, his dark eyes unreadable, silently listening to the frantic tirade of a man drowning in his own ego. When Jordan finally ran out of breath, panting and red-faced, the silence in the room was deafening. Jae Kyun slowly stood up, buttoning his suit jacket with chilling precision. "If you are done, you can leave, Jordan," he said, his voice a quiet, lethal blade. "My relationship with Aliya is none of your concern." Fiercely humiliated by Jae Kyun's unshakable composure, Jordan spun on his heel and stormed out, the heavy office doors slamming behind him. Jordan's rage soon morphed into a ruthless new strategy. His investigator uncovered the one secret that changed everything: Aliya's clinic visits. The moment Jordan learned about the pregnancy, his lingering attachment to Kim evaporated entirely. He didn't want a robotic, corporate machine for a partner anymore. He wanted his legacy. He needed to claim his child and, by extension, the woman carrying it. The following week, Aliya sat nervously in the waiting room of her private obstetrics clinic. Jae Kyun, who usually never missed an appointment, had been delayed by a sudden, critical board meeting. He had texted her, promising to be there within 20 minutes, but Jordan arrived first. He marched into the clinic, his presence sucking the air from the room. He cornered Aliya, towering over her with a menacing glare. "You're coming back to my house, Aliya. Today," Jordan sneered. "Or I swear with every dollar I have, I will drag you through the courts and take full custody of that child the second it's born." For a fraction of a second, the old Aliya, the innocent, timid girl, wanted to shrink away. But as Jordan threatened the life growing inside her, something ancient and fierce ignited in her blood. Motherhood rose through her, shattering her fragile posture. Aliya stood up, her eyes blazing with a fire Jordan had never seen. "How dare you?" she shouted, releasing all the suffocating distress she had pressed against her chest for months. "You abandoned us for a luxury vacation and a hollow affair. You have no right to this child." She stepped closer to him, her voice ringing with pride. "You think money makes you a man? Jae Kyun is 10 times the man you will ever be. He protected me when you broke me. He cherishes this child while you only see a possession." As her words echoed through the sterile hallway, the clinic doors slid open. Jae Kyun stood at the entrance, breathless from rushing. He froze, listening to Aliya fiercely defend him, her voice full of pride and strength. Hearing her stand up for herself, and for him, melted the icy armor around Jae Kyun's heart completely. Despite Aliya's fierce defense, Jordan's bruised ego drove him to deliver one final, venomous strike. "You think he's going to play daddy forever?" Jordan spat, pointing a finger at her. "I am the biological father. I have the resources. I will take the custody of my child, and there is nothing he can do to stop me." The absolute certainty in Jordan's voice pierced through Aliya's adrenaline. The fierce motherly rage suddenly gave way to a blinding, paralyzing fear. Her breath hitched, and she lost control of her composure. She spun around and seeing Jae Kyun standing there, she immediately lunged toward him. A profound wave of relief washed over her as she collided with his solid frame. She melted against him, burying her face into his chest, her hands gripping his lapels as she sobbed. Jae Kyun. He says that he will take my child. Jae Kyun wrapped one arm securely around her trembling shoulders, shielding her from the world. His other hand dropped to his side, his knuckles turning stark white as his fists clenched with a terrifying primal fury. When he looked up at Jordan, his eyes were completely darkened, a storm of absolute ruin. You don't have a single right to talk about my child. Jae Kyun's voice deepened, vibrating with a dark, commanding authority that commanded the entire room. He is mine and he is ours. He is not a trophy to take with you, Jordan. Jae Kyun pulled Aliya closer, resting his cheek against the top of her head, his fierce gaze never leaving Jordan's pale face. I love him. You can't have our child. Listening to his unwavering words, to the complete unconditional acceptance in his voice, Aliya was completely overwhelmed. The man who owed her nothing had just claimed her child as his own, with all the love of a true father. She hugged Jae Kyun tightly, crying tears of profound relief and gratitude into his chest. Standing a few feet away, Jordan felt the atmosphere shift. He looked at the imposing billionaire and the woman clinging to him. He finally understood the raw, immovable power of Jae Kyun's actions over his own empty words. There was no court in the world, and no amount of money, that could break the fortress Jae Kyun had built around Aliya. Defeated by a love he was incapable of understanding, Jordan went entirely silent. He turned his back on them and walked out of the clinic, choosing to retreat back to his hollow, corporate dream alongside a robotic woman like Kim, leaving Aliya and Jae Kyun to their unbreakable peace. 3 years had passed, and the once quiet penthouse was now entirely alive, thrumming with the joyous sounds of a family built on unyielding devotion. The afternoon sun cast a warm, golden hue across the marble floors of the living room. Daddy! The tiny, energetic voice echoed down the hallway before a small toddler with unruly dark curls and bright, mischievous eyes came barreling into the room. He launched himself into the air, jumping right into Jae Kyun's waiting arms. Jae Kyun caught the boy effortlessly, pressing a kiss to his forehead with an endless, boundless love. Hey there, my little champion. He laughed, his deep voice filled with a warmth that was reserved entirely for his family. The toddler immediately pouted, wrapping his little arms around Jae Kyun's neck. Daddy, Mama won't let me eat ice cream. He complained, his lower lip trembling in a practiced display of childhood tragedy. Right on cue, Aliya walked into the living room. She looked radiant, her presence filling the vast space with the comforting scent of lavender. Her eyes narrowed playfully as she spotted the little boy clinging to Jae Kyun's chest. James Kyun, Aliya announced with a gentle but commanding voice, I told you that you are not allowed ice cream, or else you will get a cold easily. Jae Kyun stood up, holding James securely against his chest, and walked closer to Aliya. He looked down at her, a teasing glint in his dark eyes. My God, you are being so rude, Mama, he chuckled, brushing a stray lock of hair from Aliya's cheek. My little champion can have ice cream today if he wants to. He gently set the cheering toddler down on the floor, patting his head. Go and get your ice cream, James. Yay! James squealed, turning on his heel and sprinting toward the kitchen where Mrs. Park was already laughing. Aliya crossed her arms, turning to Jae Kyun with a look of pure exasperation. You are spoiling your son, Jae Kyun, she scolded softly, shaking her head. Annoyed by his immediate surrender to those puppy dog eyes, she turned to leave the living room and head back to her study. Hey, come here you, my naughty mama, Jae Kyun murmured. Before she could take another step, he caught her from behind, his strong arms caging securely around her waist. He pulled her flesh against his chest, dipping his head to press a soft, lingering kiss to the crook of her neck. A delightful shiver ran down Aliya's spine. James went to eat ice cream, Jae Kyun whispered, his voice cheerful yet dropping to a husky, deep pitch right against her ear. So then, shall I have some quality time with you, Mama? A blush crept up Aliya's neck, and she smiled with sudden shyness, leaning back into his solid embrace despite her protests. I have a lot of work to do today, Jae Kyun. Leave me, she teased, trying half-heartedly to pry his hands from her waist. Jae Kyun only chuckled, wrapping his arms tighter around her and resting his chin on her shoulder. No, I will not leave you forever, my dear wifey. Aliya let out a soft sigh of complete contentment, placing her hands over his. They stood there together in the center of the penthouse, wrapped in each other's arms, looking out through the floor-to-ceiling windows as the sky shifted into brilliant shades of orange and pink, watching the sunset over the city that had finally given them their happily ever after. Some stories are too powerful to remain hidden in the dark. If you want to find out more Afro-Korean stories, click the subscribe button, hit the notification bell, and join us here at Tales Unsaid, where the deepest secrets are finally brought to light. New stories drop weekly, so make sure you don't miss a single word.